Welcome back to Mr. Hayden's Ag Lessons. I am Mr. Hayden, your host, and this is episode 9, and we are talking about entomology today. Welcome back, crew. First and foremost, I want to start off and say, hey, sorry for not getting this episode out last night, Thursday night. Kind of got caught up in kids' bath time, and I'm just exhausted. The kids are taking it out of me these days at home with them. So I appreciate some of the texts from our viewers making sure I'm all right. We did not get struck by the coronavirus, so just got this one out one day late. But we're going to be talking about entomology today, which is actually the study of insects. And a lot of you might be saying, Mr. Hayden, what do insects have to do with agriculture? Well, there's a lot of pros of insects in agriculture and also a lot of negatives with insects in agriculture. So we're going to cover that today and tell you how they impact your life and your food supply. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Dr. Wendy Winterstein, the first female president of Iowa State University. She's an entomologist, and she knows her bugs, okay? And so what we're going to start with today is entomology, all right? We as humans, we have discovered and named 1,500,000 different insects. So when you think, you're like, Mr. Hayden, that sounds like a pretty big number. I know that's a lot of zeros, but the naming process of that, we have all sorts of different insects, some that are very large, some are small. And that doesn't include like our groups like our arachnids, and our worms aren't part of that either. Remember, when we're talking about insects, we're thinking about these main 3 body parts, the head, thorax, and the abdomen, and then the 6 legs is also another characteristic of them. And a lot of them have a strong exoskeleton. That is our first stump pump of the day. We're talking about Lurie's Toy Store, located here in Independence, the one store you don't want your wife to be a platinum member at. And so when we're talking about insects, they play both a huge positive and negative role. We're going to touch on us as humans. What we have done is we have gotten very good at agriculture. We've learned how to produce a lot of food in a lot of different places. And some insects view that as an all-you-can-eat buffet. And they're very happy that we grow these crops, but they also have found ways to infest our crops and to cause a large amount of damage. And so the way that they cause damage, they can do anything from eating the leaves of a plant, they can chew through the stem of a plant, they can also devour the roots or the root hairs. And then this is probably the biggest one, is they transmit plant diseases from one to another. And we're going to hear from our little green friends, the aphids, here in a second, because they're like the mosquito of the plant world, okay? So another fun fact that you got to know is 200 million individual insects for every person on this planet. I know that's kind of bugging you about that, but you're outnumbered. Just deal with it, okay? We have a much higher order of thinking. They are smaller, but yes, they have a very high number, okay? And then sometimes our insects, they don't always start out how they begin. And what I mean by that is the common one that you might have been taught in elementary school is our egg to larva to pupa to adult. And we're going to talk about integrated pest management later on and how we control those insects at different stages of their lives, okay? And so, Mr. Hayden, I know that you have 3 kids of your own. You seem to be fairly prolific, but some insects can lay up to 2,000 eggs per season. And the wax scale is one of those insects located down in the southeast United States. Causes a lot of damage to orchards and different citrus groves. And so when you think about an insect and its ability to reproduce, a lot of insects, they can create many offspring, and they have a quick turnaround in the number of offspring they can create. So, and when you think about insects, don't think they're all good, guys, because even our good friends, not really friends, but did you know the Soviet Union at one point tried to train insects to be spies? You've heard of them. They're called the KGBs, okay? And then if you thought that one was great, then you're going to love this one, because what insect is actually on the ground but also 100 feet in the air? Well, it's a centipede on its back. But when you think about that one, now that I got you on the floor rolling in laughter at home, I got to lay this one on you. What's worse than a worm in your apple? Half a worm, okay? So when you think about all those different ways that insects impact our life, like I said, we're going to focus shortly on the negative part of it for right now. Like I said, aphids a second ago, they look like tiny little green bumps on the underside of the leaf. And what they do is they actually insert their pincer into the veins of the leaf. They suck out the nutrients, but in that process, they put in different diseases that they've gotten from different plants. So they are a disease vector for plants. One of the big ones in Iowa is the corn rootworm, and it pretty much does what it says. It's a worm that gets into the root system of the corn. It chews up those root hairs, and then it eats through the root and follows the root back to the main base of that plant. So you'll notice damage happening to corn that way, and we've developed some genetically modified crops that help fight off some of those corn rootworm damage that occurs, okay? And then lastly, when you think about your own home garden, some of the insects you might see in your garden might be the squash bug. It looks like a gray spade type insect. And well, the way we get around that is by planting our viney crops late enough in June that they aren't an issue, but they actually bite into the plant and they excrete a toxic saliva into the plant. And so it destroys its stem tissue, and there's a couple different ways that we can control for that. So I know that I'm making bugs sound like the bad guy, but there is hope. They are a very important part of our ecosystem, and they do play a very important role in agriculture. Like I said, in terms of ecosystem, insects are a huge food source for a lot of our lower consumers. So when you think about all the different creatures that might prey on insects, there's a lot of them out there. Like we said, 200 million individual insects for every human on the planet. The other big one that we're really going to talk about is we're going to talk about the honeybee, okay? The honeybee pollinates many of our fruit and vegetable crops. Not so much corn and soybeans there. A lot of that's done by the wind, but our honeybee plays a huge role in a lot of the fruit and vegetable production. And what you see there is a typical honeybee, it can visit up to 5,000 flowers in one day in the summertime, okay? And by going to those different flowers, it pollinates the flower, which allows seeds to form. In a lot of cases, it allows the fruit or vegetable to form. Without pollination, there is no fruit or vegetable. So sometimes a grove or an orchard or a vegetable producer will actually pay a beekeeper to bring their beehives to their production area, and they will leave them during the pollination period, and that'll help with pollination percentages in terms of the plants, and then they'll get much more of a crop. So bees, they play a huge role. And then also, just another bee fact is, it takes about 2 million flowers visited, the nectar they get from that, to make 1 pound of honey. Now, I know that sounds like a sweet deal for us as humans, but those bees, they're really just working their tails off, okay? And so when you see a beehive out there, out in nature, it's a very buzzing factory. It's busy. Bees are flying in and out, and they're traveling all around visiting a bunch of different flowers there. Okay, so our bees, like I said, a huge benefit to us as in agriculture. And then I also wanted to touch on the beneficial insects. Okay, and one of those examples is the ladybug. Now, I found this in my kids' toy room. This is not an anatomically correct ladybug, but it only has 4 legs. I don't know who made this, but it's not very correct, and it is smiling as well. But this ladybug right here, she actually preys on aphids, and so ladybugs are an example of a beneficial insect, ones that can kill insect that does a lot of damage to crops. And then some of the things that you might not think about that aren't insects but help control our insect population would be things like bats. They eat many mosquitoes that decreases the spread of diseases that way, West Nile, malaria, things of that nature. And then we talked about pollination, beneficial insects, and then integrated pest management. So if I'm a producer, one of the reasons that you'll see corn and soybeans rotated is, yes, there is a nutrient relationship there, but the other reason is if I continue to plant the same crop in the same area, whatever insect was eating that crop, they lay their eggs in the old plant material, and if that's not destroyed or incorporated into the soil, even then, a lot of times, those eggs will hatch, and if you plant the same crop there, they're going to have a buffet right there waiting for them. So one of the ways that we, in terms of integrated pest management, is we do rotational crops. We rotate what we raise here in Iowa between corn and soybeans, okay? And so those are just some of the few examples of how we control bugs in our life. And as we approach the springtime, remember, our insects, they are our friends in some cases, but in some cases, they are causing damage. So we'll continue to find ways to control those insects that cause damage, but we want to make sure that we don't destroy an important part of our ecosystem. So with that, that is our second sump pump of the day, and we're going to hear from Shields Landscaping Lawn Care. They're going to take care of your lawn perfectly, even when the world isn't. But like I said, I appreciate you listening here. Episode number 9. I won't be back until Monday night, and once again, thank you for viewing, and have a great night.